Hey everyone, and welcome back to Phoenix Knowledge. Let's dive right into today's explainer because we're looking at something absolutely crucial that almost everyone overlooks. When you grab a new prescription from the pharmacy, you probably think, okay, the testing is completely done. The scientists did their thing, the regulators gave the green light, and this drug is 100% figured out, right? Well, actually no. Today we're unpacking the hidden life cycle of a medication that actually begins after it hits those pharmacy shelves. It's a continuous, unfinished journey of drug safety that literally involves every single one of us. So what actually happens after a drug gets that official stamp of approval? It is a massive misconception that regulatory approval is the finish line. Honestly, it's really just the end of the opening act. Once a medication goes to market, it graduates from being tested on a carefully selected, relatively small group of people in totally controlled clinical environments to being taken by millions of incredibly diverse people out in the messy real world. So think of marketing approval not as the end of the experiment, but as the kickoff for a massive real-world observational study.
Now, to really wrap our heads around how a drug reaches this open market phase, we have to look at two massive regulatory milestones. The first big hurdle is the IND, or Investigational New Drug Application. This just gives a manufacturer permission to conduct clinical trials in the first place, to start testing on humans in phases 1, 2, and 3. If those trials pan out, the manufacturer goes for the golden ticket, the NDA, or New Drug Application. This is the permission to actually market and sell the drug to the public. But passing that NDA checkpoint just shifts the drug from closed, strictly controlled trials right into the open consumer market. And that's exactly where the real story begins.
And that transition brings us to the main event, Phase 4. You'll also hear this called post-marketing surveillance, or PMS. Basically, these are studies that keep collecting data on a drug's long-term effects and safety in all sorts of populations after it's already on the market. What's wild about this phase is that there's no fixed duration and no highly specific patient group. Unlike those earlier phases, Phase 4 is mostly non-experimental and observational. We're not handing out placebos here. Regulators and scientists are just watching what happens when doctors prescribe the medicine in everyday, real-life practice. It's explicitly designed to catch the stuff that earlier, shorter trials simply couldn't spot.
So, what does this look like in practice? What are they actually looking for in Phase 4? Well, first off, they need to confirm the drug is actually safe and effective for huge populations out in the wild. Because when 1 million people take a pill instead of just 1,000, you're bound to detect rare or unknown adverse drug reactions, ADRs. It also lets researchers see what happens if there's an overdose or how the drug affects different age groups. And get this, sometimes Phase 4 actually leads to finding entirely new uses for a drug, which is sometimes called Phase 5. On top of that, it helps refine dosages, test new formulations, and figure out the overall economic and quality of life impact. It's a huge comprehensive safety net. Now, because this real-world data is so incredibly vital, regulatory authorities don't just kick back and wait for a phone call from the drug companies. No, they demand rigorous, strictly scheduled updates. Manufacturers have to submit what are called Periodic Safety Update Reports, or PSURs. Right after they get that marketing approval, companies have to hand over these reports every 6 months for the first 2 years. And even after that initial intense window, they still have to submit them annually for the next 2 years. This strict timeline forces a continuous loop of safety reporting. The manufacturer constantly has to prove, using real-world data, that the drug's benefits still outweigh any newly discovered risks.
Which begs the question, does this surveillance actually work? Does it catch the bad stuff? Absolutely, and sometimes the stakes are massive. Take a look at September 30th, 2004. On that exact day, the pharmaceutical giant Merck voluntarily pulled its blockbuster pain drug, rofecoxib, right off the market. Why? Because long-term, high-dosage data collected during this exact post-marketing phase revealed some seriously concerning risks of heart attacks and strokes. So harmful effects discovered during Phase 4 can, and totally do, get a drug restricted, or in this case, completely yanked from shelves. It's a pretty sobering cautionary tale, but it proves exactly why post-marketing surveillance is absolutely non-negotiable for public safety.
Now you might be wondering, where is all this data actually coming from? How do these adverse reactions even get flagged? Well, if a doctor or nurse suspects a medication is causing an adverse event, they don't just keep it to themselves. They report it to formal, localized reporting systems. In the US, the FDA relies on a system called MedWatch. Over in the UK, they use the Yellow Card system. And in India, this falls under the National Pharmacovigilance Program, which is managed by the CDSCO. Think of these regional systems as the world's distributed safety net. They catch individual reports from healthcare workers on the ground and funnel them up to regulators so they can spot those larger, dangerous trends.
And when we say these systems are strict, we mean it. Let's look at the sheer regulatory rigor required for reporting unexpected serious adverse events, or SAEs, specifically in India. During an active clinical trial, if a serious event happens, the trial site has to notify the sponsor within just 24 hours, no delays. Then they have 7 working days to notify the expert committee and 14 calendar days to alert the DCGI, the main regulatory body. The sponsor also gets 14 days to warn other investigators. Now compare that to the post-marketing phase. Even though the drug is already fully approved, if a serious event occurs out in the real world, the site still has to notify the sponsor within 24 hours, and the sponsor has to report it to the DCGI within 15 calendar days. The rapid-fire urgency absolutely does not stop just because a drug made it to the market.
And that brings us to our final thought. Clinical trials at the end of the day are human experiments designed to figure out if new drug discoveries are actually safe and effective. Well-designed trials following incredibly strict guidelines are the absolute bedrock of all our medical decisions. The ultimate goal is always safe drug approval, but knowing what we now know about Phase 4, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. If post-marketing surveillance means the observational experiment never truly ends, are we all basically lifelong participants in drug safety? It definitely makes you look at your medicine cabinet a little differently, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today on Phoenix Knowledge. Please like, share, and subscribe our channel. See you next time.